Chapter 4 this morning. We're only going to be here this week and maybe 1 or 2 more weeks at the most. But we're going to look at the next thing in this verse this morning. Good to see everybody. I'm glad you're here. Appreciate you being here. And it's a pretty day. It's going to be warmer this week. It's supposed to be 70 degrees on Christmas this year. Can you believe it? Man, Missouri, ain't it great? 10 degrees one morning and 70 the next day. Oh, well. Yep, we do have a variety. All right, Philippians 4, verse 8. We'll read it once more. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue and if there be any praise, think on these things. Lovely things. Lovely is a word that we all use from time to time. Do you ever find yourself using the word lovely? I don't that much. I've met people more recently that do use it more. And at first it seems like an antiquated word. But there's a lot of good ones that are antiquated. But we use it, and I want you to think about this. Is the premise I'm coming at this from this morning, is the fact that, once again, words mean things, and we think they mean one thing, and then they mean something else. So it changes the way we use them, changes the way we hear them, changes the way we react to them when we hear them, and whether or not we allow them in our minds and in our life. Lovely, we use it based on our own opinion about whatever it is, though. You ever think about that? You ever say, what a lovely sunset? Now, I've had that thought. I love sunsets. One of these days, if the Lord allows me, I'm going to live in a house that faces the west so I can sit on my porch and watch the sunset because I enjoy them. I'll drive my car over the hill every now and then from where I live now because I can't see the western sky. So I'll drive over the hill and go sit at Eagle Sky's entrance over there and watch the sunset. Because some of them are really lovely. Yep, it can be. But here's the thing. Think about it. Lovely. We use that word based on what we think is pretty. What is lovely to one person may not be quite so to someone else, though. I've seen people that think, well, you have too. You look at somebody and they're not an attractive person. Yet I'll promise you that somewhere in this world, somebody thinks that they are altogether lovely. Beautiful. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, they say, right? Well, that is true. Even in my work carving that I did for them years, I would carve something and think that is just absolutely hideous. I see everything that I did wrong with it, and it's just, I don't even want them to see it. And I've had them get out of the car and see it and start crying because they thought it was so beautiful. And I'm like, well, I'm glad you think it looks good because I sure don't. I don't see what you see in it. Beauty being in the eye of the beholder. But lovely means something else. In truth, our tendency to determine what is lovely is mostly just based on visuals. You ever think about that? We see something that is attractive or desirable, and we think that one of the adjectives we use to describe it is lovely. A lovely sunset, a lovely dress, a lovely woman. Now, if somebody said, sir, you are lovely, I might leave that place. Because they usually don't use that adjective to describe a man. It's always more gendered towards the feminine. Because we associate it with a visual. We just do. But we're off track right out of the gate by doing so. And while we certainly all do, and rightly so, have our own preferences about what we prefer in terms of what we find appealing, let us not forget that what we set our affections on, there will our hearts be also. So when you look at something and you say, that is lovely, you've already approved it in your mind as something that is desirable. And then the Bible, what we're reading here in this verse says, think on lovely things. But if the things that you and I assign the label of lovely to are things that we just find desirable, then what's going to be driving our thoughts? What are we going to end up doing thinking about lovely things in that terminology, in that understanding? What's going to happen? You're going to set your heart. Your affections of your heart are going to be set on the thing that you decide is lovely. And what you decide is not lovely will not be thought on, and your affections won't be set on that. Matter of fact, there's a whole other bin that those things get thrown in that you have your opinion about as well. And I can do the same thing. We tend to do that because of how we perceive and understand what is lovely. And yet in this list of things that we are to think on, that he listed specific things, lovely things are one of the things. So are we just supposed to think about pretty women and fancy cars and nice homes? And no, that's not what it means at all. So do you understand the premise here that we've established, that lovely doesn't mean the things that you think are pretty or that I think that I would love to have? Okay, that's what we've established. You spend a lot of time thinking about what your affections are set on. Do you ever think about that? Yeah. Affections don't all get set at one time. They happen over time. You know, the world tends to call them your dreams. What is your dream job? I've had people ask me that before, and I don't have a good answer. The only one that I've worked a lot of jobs, and I've did all kinds of things. But, and people look at me and just laugh when I say this. But I mean this sincerely. If I could do anything I wanted to do, and money wasn't an option, I would own me a sawmill. And I mean that. I love the sawmill. Always did. I still would like to have a sawmill. But I don't sit around every morning and every night dreaming of having a sawmill. My dream job is to not be unemployed. How about that? I mean, work is just work, and I enjoy work, but I don't live to work. I work to live. And that's why I guess I've always worked a lot of different things, because it's not the priority in my life. My affections are not set on work, or in all honesty, on money for that matter. It's a necessary evil of life, and you got to do it. And there's honor in it, and there's dignity in it. There's duty fulfilled in it. And I feel like if you approach it the right way, there's something fulfilled in you that is positive to work. The Bible talks about it some. But once again, what would be my dream? My dreams come true. Well, that's my affections. And there's the whole industry of the world is driven upon the fairy tale dreams of people, what they're striving for and what they are spending their life trying to accomplish. Some people don't give it a lot of thought. They just want to survive. They're okay with that. And then there's other people that it is very imbalanced, because their life is about nothing but making that next dollar bill, or getting that next promotion, or having that title, or having that degree behind their name. I know people that have been going to school for 20 years. They work, but they go to school at night, and they're just always working, because if they can get that next degree or that next thing on their name, then they can make more money. They can get a better job. You know, there's even pastors that do the same thing. And they just work their way up the ladder until they're in a church somewhere that pays them 6 figures a year. That happens right here in our Tri-County area. It's crazy. I don't understand it, but affections don't all happen at one time. Your affections develop, and your affections are nurtured and tended to, and they grow and they multiply, both in a good way and then in a bad way too, depending on what you set your affections on. And you'll set your affections on what you think about all the time. That's why the lust of the flesh, and then it says the lust of the eye. Well, what is that? That's the things you look at and wish you had. And then you set your affections on those things, and then the next thing you know, that's all you work for, is that thing you want so bad that you are always looking at. You know? It's a gradual thing that develops a pattern in your life. How you set your affections on things comes through the eye gate, the ear gate, and you develop a pattern in your life. The things you find attractive or desirable are the things you're going to want. And then you think about them things all the time, and then it drives what you do. And you develop a pattern in your life as you go through life. I mean, we talk about this all the time about how fast time seems to just fly by. I mean, here we are at Christmas again. I feel like I just put away all the Christmas junk in the shed, and we just had to drag it all back out. And I'm going to put it all away again. Next thing you know, is we're going to be dragging it out again. You know, how do 3 or 4 years just march by so quickly? Well, it just does. And there's like this soundtrack running in the back of your life's mind that is these things that you think about and you set your affections on. And you develop a pattern of how this happens. And each affection, each thing that you give your heart and mind and purpose to begins in the hidden places of the mind, like I just said, and you thinking about them. This usage of the word lovely in our text here is simply defined as amiable. I said, okay, that's surprising, because I figured it would, like what you said, Jacob, it would be a synonym for beautiful. And it is, but the dictionary definition of this is amiable. Well, who knows what amiable means? Well, because Spanish has influenced my thought process as much as it has in my life, amiable, it's almost like my brain tries to do this to me sometimes, and it'll translate a word that sounds Spanish into what I think it means in English without me even really addressing it. So amiable, which there's a word in Spanish called amable. And by translation, what it means is that you are a kind, approachable person. You are a generous person. Muy amable. He's a good fella. Very, very nice. Noble, yeah. But, and I mean, amable, amor, amable. Amable can literally be translated into lovable. Amiable. So I looked up what amiable means. Well, obviously it's going to define it as, first of all, lovely. Lovely. But it also said this: worthy of love and deserving of affection. Whatsoever things are lovely, if there be any virtue or praise, think on these things. Things that are worthy of love. Is that next big promotion worthy of love? Now, we're not talking about just entertaining the thought or giving it a little bit of effort to maybe advance or do. I mean, nothing wrong with advancing or doing better for yourself. But there's people set their affection on things that they think are lovely, and they don't even realize they are loving that thing. I mean, they consider it to be lovely, and so they give their love to it. Is that next new pickup, or that next new side-by-side, or whatever it is that you strive to work for, Is it deserving of your affection? Because we're not talking about just working hard so you can have something nice. Affection means you hold it, and you hold it close, and you love it, and you give it attention. You give of yourself to it. Is it deserving of that? Is it really that lovely? So, no, I'd just like to have one. It'd be nice. Well, okay, but what spot does it take up in your mind? What slot does it get to occupy in your desires, in your affections? How can understanding this is the question, how can understanding this help us as believers? All right, so here I've got two things. First, it gives us some guidelines in determining what actually qualifies as lovely, wouldn't you say? There's things that deserve a place in your life. It's just like we was talking about a job. It's really important to have work and to pursue it and to do right by those that depend on you. And to, the Bible speaks on this. Man should, if a man would not work, he shouldn't eat. A man that won't provide for his household is worse than he's denied the faith and worse than an infidel. Whoa. So providing and working is a pretty important part, even in God's eyes, for a man to do. But be careful not to set your affections on your gain. Abel was a tender of sheep. He was a keeper of sheep. So those sheep were in his charge, and he took care of them, and he had this flock of sheep. And Cain tilled the ground and brought forth fruit out of the ground. But Cain set his affection on what he did. And Abel, while he cared for his sheep, didn't set his affections on them so much that God couldn't be given one when he was asked for it. You see the difference? Cain's affection for his things changed the way he offered his sacrifice to God, instead of Abel and how he did his. And it's the same for us. Understanding this matter, this specific word in our scripture here this morning, it helps us by giving us some guidelines in determining what actually deserves to be lovely and thought about and considered and thought on in our life. A lot of things, just about anything these days, is considered by someone to be lovely, whether it is or it isn't. And we do the same. There's things that we have a whole lot higher opinion of in value and importance in our life than other people will take that same thing and have in theirs. Take, for example, mowing your yard. Now, that is a trivial thing, but it's kind of important. I drive by some places, even between here and Piedmont, and it boggles my mind that you got to look close and watch. Sometimes you got to go by at night and see if there's lights on or not, but there's people living there. And the place looks like an abandoned junkyard. Everything growed up, junk in the yard, trash. You'll see somebody and they'll put in a new place. You'll think, well, that looks pretty good. And it don't take them 6 months, and it just looks like a pile of trash. It don't look like it. It is a pile of trash everywhere. Every open space on the property is packed in with a bunch of trash. It all needs to just be pushed up in a pile and burnt, and what won't burn, dig a hole and bury it. Their place makes the property value of all the people around them go down because of the junk in the yard. So, taking care of your place is important. Wouldn't you say? Yeah, of course it is. It ain't just the visual part of it that's so horrible. Think about the vermin that are in that house because of all the junk in the yard. Can't tell me one bit that house ain't overrun with rats and mice and roaches and everything else. Because I know how hard it is to keep them little boogers out of my house, and I take care of my place best I can. And it's a constant battle, little devils. So taking care of your place It speaks to your character. It speaks to the value you put on what the Lord has given you. There's a lot of things that can be said about that. But here's the deal. There's people who go over the top. Their yard and their property is their little kingdom, and they're very proud of it. And they set their affection on getting that yard of the month sign in their yard every month. I mean, it's all they live for. It sounds crazy, but I know some of them that do it. I mean, that's what they live for. And it's a matter of pride for them, big time. You can say, well, how in the world have they got so wrapped up in this? Ain't they got anything else going on in their life? Well, they could. But they've set their affection on this thing. Does it deserve that kind of affection? Well, it needs some attention, but it don't deserve that kind of affection. And there's a lot of other examples we could give, but for the sake of time, I won't. But that, people pick out what they set their affection on. And to you might look at it and say, that is the dumbest thing I've ever seen anybody spend money on. But they've got a list this long of all the reasons why it deserves that kind of affection. You can't talk them out of it. I know people that work just blue-collar jobs and just make a living, and they spend every dime they make on their side-by-side. I'm not joking. I mean, they got $35,000, $40,000 wrapped up in a four-wheeler with a cab on it. And I think, man, I can't understand that. I mean, it's really nice. It's really fun. And look, is it wrong? Well, I'm not going to say it's a sin, but I don't put my affection on that. And they do. And, there's a certain element of it that's a matter of preference. I don't like crunchy raw onions on a hamburger. And there's a lot of people who do. Does it make me smarter or better or more intelligent because I just look at them and say, well, you dumb people, it's just, you do what you want, but I'm better than you because I know better. Well, no. See, you can even set your affection on your intelligence. Or let me rephrase that, on your assumed intelligence. See, this is the problem that I'm circling around to here because, it's all based on emotion. This matter of what you set your affection on, most of the time is always only ever grounded and like based in emotion and feelings and often your bias. I don't like onions, and so I'm smarter than you. Because if you want to crunch onions and smell like the Grinch, go ahead. But I'm not going to do it. So that makes me smarter than you. Well, is that true? Well, heavens no. There's things that I like to eat, like cottage cheese, that makes my dad just gag. But I like it. Does that make him smarter than me? No, it's just a different preference. There's things that I like to eat that he don't, things he eats that I don't. That don't make one of us better than the other one. But yet people think of it this way. The way you make your decisions, if they're based in emotions and feelings and your bias and not in fact and truth, they're going to be misleading and in this matter of what you set your affection on. Okay, do you understand how I'm making that application here is that, if you make your decisions about what is lovely and to be loved in your life and your life dedicated to in that volume, based on your feelings, based on emotions, based on bias, then you know what the Bible calls that? It's the pride of life. I become proud of who I have created myself to be because I spend my money on things that ain't stupid. And I take care of my place better than anybody around me. So I'm the example here. Why don't you people try to be a little more like me? I mean, help my property value go up by trying to make your yard look a little bit better. Why don't you? I do things this way. I got a little bit of time here. Let me say this. When I was younger, we lived in Virginia, and I worked for my father-in-law. And he taught me a whole bunch of things about how to build a house, how to run wire, how to wire a panel, how to do all kinds of things in the trades. Well, being a pretty arrogant young man most of my life, I watched how he did it. And then I thought to myself, okay, that right there, that piece of what he did right there could be done this way, and it's more efficient. It'll get done quicker. The end result is still going to be the same. And so I would say, okay, and then I would go do what he showed me how to do, but I'd do it my way. Did I accomplish what needed to be done? Yeah, I did. Did it get done faster? Yes, it did. But he would get so upset at me because it's not the way he did it. And look, as my employer, my duty to him was to do it the way he told me how to do it. Now, at where I'm at in life now, I know that there is a way that I could have approached him privately, not in front of the crew, not in an arrogant way, and presented my idea to him, and he would have probably been like, yeah, do it however you want. But because of the way, in my mind, that made me superior to him, because I figured out a better way to do it. And the way I did that, it was offensive to him, and he responded in kind. And we butted heads big time about a lot of things that way. What made me do that? Is the pride of life. It was my arrogance in how I thought I was smarter than the average Joe because I could figure things out and come up with a better way. Now, did I? Well, I'll just say accidentally, probably, yeah. I mean, I wasn't super smart. But you see how I missed the forest for the trees there? What was motivating me to flex my arrogance and intelligence the way I did? It was my pride. It was what I set my affection on. I felt like I had to prove everything to everyone around me about how much smarter I was than them. Well, let me just say that it didn't help me. It didn't advance my cause very well. Why? Well, because it was coming from the wrong place. And yeah, I didn't do it in a lovely way. And so when you base your decision making on feelings and emotions and your own opinion of yourself, your bias about yourself, then it's very misleading and untrustworthy. You go to making important decisions that way, and you're going to crash. You're going to wind up with a bucket with a hole in it, is what you'll do. So understanding this matter about what is lovely, the second thing that it'll help us in the matter of even as a believer, it'll make us more intentional to seek out and find and then honor truly lovely things. I feel like, how I said there, how that your affections don't all just happen at once. You build them and you nurture them, and then you add to them and you collect the things that you set your affections on. What the Bible says, set your affections on things above, not on things of the earth. Why? Well, because the things of the earth pass away. They're temporal. And the things above are eternal. So that tells me right there that I can intentionally pick the right thing to set my affections on. Your affections, that's why the whole, like the verbiage of saying, we fell in love is kind of misleading, because you don't just accidentally stumble and fall and hit your head and now you're in love. No, you choose. It's an intentional thing that you choose. You choose to set your affection on someone. And you do that about things too. And so understanding what really is lovely, being able to recognize what deserves affection and what doesn't, what is worthy of love and what isn't, will fundamentally change what you set your affections on. And so it's really important for us to understand this matter. When you set your affections on things undeserving of it, and when you give your love to something or someone that's not worthy of it, it's because you've called lovely what isn't lovely. And I'm not talking about the visual. I'm not talking about visual, like, you've heard people say they saw something in that no one else could see. Well, that's kind of a good example. You ever see somebody take an old rusted out car and restore it? Yeah. Well, I see $300 at the scrapyard. Someone else sees a restored vintage vehicle or something, Or they take and make something else out of them that they weren't originally, and they repurpose them into something that's usable again. They've seen something in that no one else could see. Why? Well, because they put value on something that it could be. And that's one of the things that we can do and try to make a habit of, try to make it our default, if you will, is to look at things and look at people and see what is lovely or what could be lovely in them. That's how God does. He sees people for what they could be, what they can be. And that's why he sees beauty in things we don't. Why he sees value in things that we sometimes can't. And if we're to be more like him, then we've got to start thinking like him in these matters. What do people do this with? What do they call lovely that isn't? Well, I've kind of already covered it, but I wrote down some things. Like a potential mate. That's probably the first thing that comes to mind when you think of I don't know what she sees in him, or vice versa. And yet they think they hung the moon. Boy could be ugly as a mud fence, and she thinks he's just the most handsome man. Or vice versa. Poor old gal looks like she's got to sneak up on a dipper to get a drink, and he thinks she is the most beautiful woman in the world. Why? Because he sees something in her, she sees something in him that she thinks is lovely. Is that wrong? Well, it depends on what she's using or he's using for his standard of lovely. There's a whole lot of really beautiful people that are the farthest thing from lovely that ever was. Most beautiful woman, the most handsome, successful man, and they are a devil to the core. And that all they do is get with somebody and ruin their life forever. Forever. And depending on how long they stick it out, they ruin the kids' lives too. Sad. Well, at one point, that person thought the other one was absolutely lovely. But were they? No. Why? Because they were basing what they thought was lovely on the wrong set of standards. People do it with jobs. I've seen people literally ruin their life chasing a job. Throw away something that was good to try for the gamble of something better and lose. Wind up working at the gas station again, man. Why? Well, because they put the wrong emphasis or they use the wrong criteria for determining what they set their affection on. People do this with cars, houses. You've heard me talk about the house we built, giant $750,000 home, and I heard the homeowner come through one day and say, "I hope this makes us happy." And it wasn't like they had millions laying around to just throw away on a house on a whim. They were coming at great cost to them. But they just had to have it. They set their affection on something, hoping for a desired outcome that you're trying to draw water from an empty well here. They set their affection on something that it didn't deserve their affection. People do it with churches. People do this with the church. You have this preconceived idea of what you expect church to give you. And I'm not talking about what the Lord has to give you at church. I'm talking about what church has to offer. That's why you hear so many people say, we'd like to come visit your church, but, what do you guys do for the kids? Or, what kind of programs do you have for the young couples or the youth or whatever? And look, there's nothing wrong with any of those things. But people, they decide if they're going to give their affection to a church, if they're going to give, they determine, I'm messing up here, they determine whether they believe that church is lovely in that way based on what it can give them and what it can do for them. And people get jaded on church because I can promise you that for everything good church has to offer, there's something you can find that don't sit right in just about everyone you go to. If you look, if that's what you're going there looking for, that's what you'll find. And so if that's what's determining whether you believe or, whether you're going to be faithful or even attend regular or whatever about church, then it's not gonna hold water. It won't follow through. So we develop habits and traits in our life, in opinion, in preference, in decision making about what actually is lovely. And if we're not careful, it becomes the pride of our life. The idea that my opinion or thoughts on any matter are right and therefore makes me better or superior to everyone else makes me not a very lovely person. It turns me into somebody who doesn't deserve affection, who's not worthy of love. You say, well, everybody's worthy of it. Well, it'd be a sad state of affairs if there was no love for you in this world. It really would. So as Christians, I believe that we always ought to have a spirit of love towards everyone. God's grace in us ought to shine through in that way. But you and I can both agree that there are people that are very hard to love. And it don't necessarily have to do with my opinion of them as much as it does with their behavior. And can the same be said about me? Yeah, it can. I can behave myself in such a way that makes me unlovable. I can treat other people so badly that I don't deserve affection. And you can too. And so in this matter of whatsoever things are lovely, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things. The reason why that's there is because you'll set your affection on the things you think about. And so if you think on things that deserve your love and deserve your affection and they're worthy of it, then those are the things that you'll set your affection on. And they're worth it. They're the right things to set your affection on. And so in each of our lives, let's just try to be more purposeful in thinking about the things that are truly lovely, that truly do deserve a place in our mind and in our life, in our efforts to be loved. And the things like yard of the month, or the big finest house on the block, or the biggest herd of cows in the back pasture, or whatever it is that people take pride in that don't deserve that much attention. Let's try to prioritize the right things. It pleases the Lord when we set our affections on things above. It makes us more effective as Christians when people can look at you and say, I mean, that man has a nice truck, but he don't worship that truck. You understand what I mean? All right, I'm done.